you are no stranger to big tech companies. Obviously, you co-founded PayPal. Next week, the CEOs of Apple, Alphabet, Facebook, and Amazon are going to be appearing before Congress on antitrust issues. Do you think there's a case for any of these big tech companies to be broken up?
So I think there are two things conflated in this one, and I am sort of a polar opposites opinion on the two topics. So antitrust, anti-competitive behavior, like, I think that is unequivocally bad, and I think Congress is doing its job by, and I'm sure it's no fun to be hauled out in front of Congress, and I sort of don't wish that upon myself or my friends or enemies, but I do think it is the job of our legislators and all the other branches of government to make sure that the large companies don't abuse their power. However, I do think that breaking them up is a terrible idea. I think we compete on a global stage. Every one of these companies has significant global presence, and they compete with companies that have similar resources because of their scale. Enforcing antitrust law, making sure that people don't overstep what fair competition means, I think is a really, really important, powerful idea, foundation of our flavor of capitalism. I think stripping our economy of its most powerful defenders on a world stage is a bad idea.
So you think breaking up these companies would be a bad idea?
I do.
Why?
I think as they face their Chinese counterparts, maybe their European counterparts, there is power in bundling. There's power in having vertical integration. There's power in being able to operate at significant scale. Imagine Apple being forced to break everything into software and hardware, and maybe even hardware by line. Companies like Huawei have everything under one roof. They'll be able to outprice them and undistribute them.
But what if that stifles innovation for new American companies, new upstarts like Affirm once was?
Affirm is still very much an upstart. I'm not sure we're out of the little leagues just yet, but we're growing very quickly. But I don't think one precludes the other. I think it is the role of the regulators and legislators to level the playing field and make sure that competition is fair. I think the role of an upstart is to challenge the status quo and to go up against the Goliaths and be the striver and be smarter and execute faster and all the things that make startups great. I think breaking large corporations down into tiny little pieces to make it easier for me to compete with them is misguided, because their job is not to compete with me at all. It's to compete with the bigger guys from overseas.
Now, I want to ask you a separate question about Facebook, because I know that Affirm pulled its advertising from Facebook, and Facebook has been in the middle of this controversy over how it handles hate speech and specifically the president's posts. Why did you pull your advertising from Facebook? And do you think that Mark Zuckerberg is making the right calls about political speech?
First of all, I think it's super complicated, and I can honestly tell you I do not envy Mark Zuckerberg, because he is facing some very weighty decisions. I do think they're trying. I believe them when they say that they are striving to do better. I think the very specific thing, and as someone who came to the US as a refugee from, at the time, a very anti-Semitic state for very specific reasons, I have a very strong held view that enforcing free speech is very important, and eliminating hate speech or controlling hate speech and beating it back, because it fundamentally is one step away from violence, and that's what it incites, is very important. And so the reason we spoke up and will continue to speak up is because it is the job of large, visible, important companies that are also public forums to help fight hate speech. That said, I am, again, as a refugee from a former Soviet Union, of all places, a big believer in free speech. I believe it is essential that opposing opinions, even if they're anti-Semitic, so long as they don't call for violence, are stated, and people can make their own judgment what is repulsive and what is an interesting debate.
One more question about Apple in particular, given that part of the contention about Apple's anti-competitive practices surrounds Apple Pay, and Affirm is a platform that allows people to pay. Do you believe that anything with Apple Pay in particular, specifically that its NFC technology is only available to Apple and Apple Pay, and that other payments providers can't use that technology, is that anti-competitive in the payments landscape?
You know, that's a probably question that I haven't spent a ton of time thinking through. I do have to say that Affirm works just fine with Apple Pay. You can create your virtual card with Affirm right now in the Affirm app and add it with a couple of taps into your Apple Pay wallet, and it works great. So in that sense, I don't find it anti-competitive at all. I actually find it very accommodating and extremely useful. Um, I think from my point of view, they've done very lots of right things.